Well, good day, everybody, and welcome to the memory edition of 5-Minute Psych. In this 5-minute segment, we'll explore how we remember, which hinges on two processes, encoding and retrieval. We'll start with encoding and discuss 4 ways to increase our ability to get information into long-term memory. Then we'll consider 2 mnemonic strategies before ending with retrieval and a discussion of factors that affect how well we can remember. The way that information gets into memory greatly impacts how well we can get it out later, and the more that we actively do something with the content, the more likely it will be remembered. Researchers who studied this called it depth of processing, showing that the more deeply we processed something, the better our memory for it was. So what would be considered shallow processing? Rote rehearsal, just like repeating the information over and over again, does very little to get something in memory. Instead, you want to process it deeply. So how do you do that? There are many ways to process something deeply, but understanding it is a big one, because then you've linked that new content with stuff that you already know. And once it's integrated like that, it just becomes part of your general knowledge. Organizing the stuff that you want to remember is also a good way to deeply process it. Maybe you reorganize the content into smaller chunks and then learn each chunk, or maybe you're able to organize it into a meaningful hierarchy. Sometimes you can make the new content distinctive somehow, either by making it personally relevant or even just by making it different and silly. Either way, making that new content stick out from the background will improve memory. Finally, using visual imagery is also a great way to make sure that you process something deeply because you're actively creating a picture of the content in your mind. Mnemonics are memory aids that connect the new content that you're trying to learn with a memorized system that you already have in place. For example, the method of loci is a mnemonic strategy where you have a memorized environment with many different locations, and then you mentally place each item that you want to remember in one of these imagined locations. Some people use a Monopoly board, which has up to 40 unique locations. Others use their house and imagine walking through the different rooms, putting an item that they need to remember in each room. Upon retrieval, they just mentally retrace their path to remember all the items. Another mnemonic strategy is the peg word system. Now, instead of having an environment committed to memory, you've memorized a list of items along with numbers like 1 is a bun, 2 is a shoe, 3 is a tree, 4 is a door, and so on. And then you would link each new item that you wanted to remember with each item in your memorized list. Now, both the method of loci and the peg word system are great for memorizing a list of items when the items have to be remembered in order. But they don't work well for content that's difficult to visualize, like justice or democracy. Our long-term memory is organized like a web of related concepts, and we know this from phenomena like priming. For instance, right now I want you to think of the definition of the word bark. Got it? Okay, chances are you thought of the sound that a dog makes rather than the skin of a tree, simply because I had this picture showing when I asked you to define bark. That's priming. The picture primed you to think about bark one way, even though you could have gone another way, and the fact that you did this shows how our concepts are associated in memory. Knowing that long-term memory is organized this way means that anything that's linked with the original memory can serve as a retrieval cue for that memory. What else do we know about retrieval cues? Well, our success at retrieving a memory is greater if we have multiple retrieval cues available. That way, if one cue doesn't activate the memory, perhaps another one would. We also do better if the retrieval cues that we use are ones that we created ourselves, rather than being told what cue we have to use. And finally, our memory is best if there's a match between the conditions of encoding and retrieval, whether it's the same environmental context, the same physiological state, or even the same mood. That all helps with retrieval compared to if there are different contexts, different state, different mood. Well, we just looked at how we remember by starting with encoding and a discussion of 4 ways to increase our ability to get information into long-term memory. Then we considered 2 mnemonic strategies before ending with a discussion about retrieval cues and factors that affect how much and how accurately we remember. Now, aren't you glad you had 5 minutes?